it's
and then we'll basically like start going.
Okay, there's no people.
Once there's.
Oh, there's a person.
Yay! Okay. I'm just gonna prep real quick.
Is this when you want me to break that silence?
What?
He said, is this when you want me to break that silence?
Yes, exactly. Just start saying anything. You can come on up here.
Yeah, I don't know how close up you want.
So we're gonna be talking mainly about these two devices. So like good close shots are gonna be good.
Okay.
But do we have some people in?
Just one.
Okay. Well, cool. I'm gonna pull a shot real quick and make sure all these are kind of calibrated properly.
Here we have another person. 3 people.
You guys, welcome to the stream. I'm just kind of getting set up real quick here, make sure that all my cool tools are calibrated properly. That's good. Hey guys, happy National Coffee Day for those of you in the US. So today we want to do a quick stream to talk about these guys. This is the Dozer by Mahlgut out of Germany. This is their old style palm tamper, but the buzzer is basically the same thing, except instead of this flat top, they now use this curved kind of palm friendly design. And call it the buzzer because it kind of looks like a game show buzzer. So I just wanted to kind of talk about what's going on with these like puck style tampers and distribution tools. You know, you're probably seeing a lot more of them these days if you're paying attention to specialty coffee and espresso prep in general. You're starting to see them in competition a lot, like the World Barista Championship earlier this year. You saw a lot of the OCD, the Ona coffee distributor, that looks similar to this, except these guys are made out of steel. In this design, it's anodized aluminum. The OCD, I believe, has a plastic top, and they work a little bit differently as well. But I want to talk about what these offer your coffee preparation and kind of how they fit into your bar flow, what the significance is, you know, why you might actually be interested in something like this. So just to start off, I'm going to pull another shot and kind of talk through my workflow as I'm using these and kind of give you an idea of what role each plays and how it differs from more traditional espresso prep. So just as I prep any shot, I'm going to just tear out my portafilter and then I'm going to grind like 19 grams of coffee here. So that's 18. Using the Mythos, I'm kind of lucky with this particular grinder because it produces a very, as you can see, a very like fluffy, centered mound of coffee, which certainly isn't the case with every grinder. I'm just discarding down to 19 grams here. So like a lot of grinders, even commercial ones, you know, they'll give you kind of a clumpy grind, or especially ones with dosers, they often kind of distribute or dose rather heavily on like one side of the basket, which can kind of lead to some shot problems if you don't correct for it. You know, if you were to have a heavy dose that's on one side and just tamp straight down, the result that you're going to get in the puck is more density where that coffee was kind of mounded, and less density where it sort of got pushed over as you compressed it. And that means that water, as it flows through the puck, is going to find the path of least resistance. So it's going to flow and channel more heavily through that less dense side, and not really extract it as much as the denser side would. So you're going to get some really kind of wonky, uneven extractions. It's not going to taste great. So ever since the very first day that we realized that you can actually play with a basket of coffee and get a different result in the cup, people have found all kinds of different ways to distribute or groom their pucks and figure out how to pull shots better and more consistently. Now, there's all kinds of tools as well. For years there have been like little scraper tools, or people use like a paperclip method to stir up their grinds or something like that. And a lot of those don't really have a good place in a shop setting because of how complicated they can be and how much extra time they add to a shot prep. Already you're talking about maybe 30 or 40 seconds of prep time, or prep time just pulling a shot, plus grinding and anything externally to that. So if somebody's expecting a really quick cup of coffee, you're talking about 2 minutes or so. Anything that you add is going to add more time to that. So really the best tools for commercial espresso production are the ones that are the easiest and the simplest to use. And that's not universally the case. There are some cafes that can kind of get away with a more slow service model, but usually you want something that you can just plop right in there, groom it, just be done with it, or have the grinder do it for you or something like that. Do we have a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
Someone says, isn't it just a copy of Sasa's OCD?
I mean, copy is debatable, I guess. If you look into the history of these things, some of the first ones that popped up were on like a Chinese coffee forum, I think in like 2008 or something like that. Like, it's kind of an older design. People basically like looked at the same sort of thing and said, there were users who basically 3D printed some of their own. Sasha's design is probably the first one that actually came to market for commercial use, but there have been other models and other designs that have floated out there for a while. So yeah, I mean, sure, call it a copy of the OCD if you want. The result is very similar. The design is very similar. The one thing that I think the Mahlgut has over the OCD is that, so the OCD has like an upper cap, basically, just like this one does. And if I take this apart, I can sort of emulate it in a way. So I take the upper part off mine. So the OCD almost looks like this without this threaded rod sticking out. And in order to adjust the depth on the OCD, you have to put like washers in between the piston and the cap, which is probably a reasonable way to go about it. For most people, it's probably going to be a fine solution. But the Mahlgut is designed basically to have, I won't say infinite adjustment because it has a definite range, but within that range, it is infinite adjustment. So if you need to adjust, like a half of a millimeter because you're just about grooming properly, or you're just skimming and you want to actually compress it a little tiny bit more, you can do that, and you can do it very easily just by quickly untwisting the two adjustment mechanisms, twisting the base left or right, and again, it's threaded, so counterclockwise is going to make it deeper, clockwise is going to make it more shallow, and then you just twist the two pieces to lock it in place. So very easy to adjust on the fly as needed. So if you're changing your dose or you're changing your coffees or something like that, you can very easily adjust the depth without having to find another piece of equipment or another washer or spacer or what have you to insert and risk losing it or whatever. You basically have an all-in-one device that can adjust your depth for you. That's what we really like about it. I have nothing against the OCD, of course. We just carry the Mahlgut instead. They do basically the same thing and achieve the same result. Anyway, so like I was saying, the benefit here is that you've got a tool that can basically quickly groom your coffee bed and kind of level it out for pretty repeatable, consistent results, as long as you're not messing with your dose too much, which you probably aren't doing in a cafe environment anyway. Aren't messing with your grind too much as well. You know, you can get really good, consistent results with something like this. And again, like the OCD. So if I've got a bed of coffee that looks like this, and I just want to flatten and level it, I can take my grooming tool, lay it right on top, and just give it a quick spin, and now I've got a level bed of coffee. Now there is a little tiny bit of compression going on, but it's basically the design is such that you're not using it like a tamper. You're not supposed to really compress the puck. You would use this and then a tamper in order to actually compress the coffee and get it prepared. So what you've basically done is you've taken that upper layer, which might be less dense and might be kind of crazy or clumpy even. You're flattening it out, you're leveling it out, and preparing it for a good level tamp. When you are using a puck style tamper like this is a fantastic tool because you've basically already ensured that you have a level bed of coffee for your puck style tamp, which is going to hit the basket and basically tamp perpendicular to the basket or parallel with the basket walls, almost no matter what. If you set the depth too deep, you know, and you are still just basically using it as a traditional tamper, you can still, of course, tamp slightly crooked, unless you have an oversized piston that doesn't really have much rotation inside the basket. But anyway, so we have a really nice level puck of coffee here, and it took me 1 extra second to prepare it, which is, you know, it's phenomenal. There are other methods of distributing your puck, and I hesitate to call the Dozer a distributor because it doesn't do a whole lot to the coffee below the surface of the puck. It's more of a groomer. It really only affects that top layer. It's hard to really quantify how deep it can go and how deep into the puck it actually affects. But you know, the actual like veins here that are doing the work, the little ramps as you rotate, they're not very deep on their own. They're maybe 2 millimeters or 3 millimeters. So they're not going to be doing a lot of compressing anyway. And really the idea is just to get you a level surface that's going to perform it's going to form a more uniform density across the surface. And again, like with those ramps, you're slightly pushing coffee like laterally, rotationally. So it helps to break up, or seems to help to break up those pockets of different densities that you might see if your grinder is dosing not centered. So that's great, and that, you know, we've seen and we've tested the extractions, and they seem to get a lot more consistent when you use a tool like this. We actually have looked at the results from an OCD. The trainer, Michael Butterworth at Quills, had an OCD, and we looked at some of his shots and his data, and he was saying that he was seeing really consistent extractions when using an OCD versus just tamping. And we found basically the same thing when using a Dozer. The shots taste a lot more consistent. They pull a lot more consistent. And you know, between using like the Dozer and, in this case, Palm, but the Dozer and the Buzzer, the 2 Mahlgut products, 2 puck style sort of tamping and grooming tools, with almost like no extra time added to your workflow, you all of a sudden just improve your shot consistency tremendously. Now, granted, it is another tool to keep on your workbench, something else to keep clean or worry about getting knocked around. And yeah, you know, that is sort of a complication, but I think most competent coffee bars can handle that with ease. But I don't know. I mean, I've really fallen in love with the Dozer. When we first got it in the old style, you know, I almost didn't want to let go of it, but we only had a couple of them. We sold through those pretty quickly, and we were really eagerly waiting the new batch to come in, which came in like a couple weeks ago. So we've been playing with one ever since these came in, and again, it's so easy to fall in love with something that makes it so easy to pull more consistent shots with really nothing added to your workflow. And like at home, I use the La Pavoni. We shot a video a couple months ago of my like La Pavoni workflow where I use like a cake tester to stir my grounds, and then I have this whole, you know, routine where I like have a dosing funnel and I tap it, and then I kind of move the dosing funnel around to level the grounds a little bit, and you know, all that stuff that I do at home and go through like, you know, an extra 5 minutes of shot prep, is taken care of in like 1 second with the Dozer. It's just a phenomenal upgrade over doing all that stuff by hand. So enough about the Dozer. The Dozer is really cool. It's a fun tool. But let's talk about puck tampers in general. So again, the Mahlgut style of addressing this, I don't want to say issue, but basically of creating the solution to this idea that, you know, when you give a human being a tamper and you ask them to tamp a basket of coffee, you will almost always see some kind of rotation. You know, maybe they're thumb heavy and they push their thumb down too much when they're pushing on the piston, and that creates a slanted bed of coffee. And again, you know, because you end up playing with the density of the coffee puck, the water is going to flow through different parts of the puck differently, just because of the human error that's been introduced. So you can pick up, you know, mechanical tampers, like they have like spring-loaded lever action ones. They have electronic ones, you know, that you can basically just stick your portafilter in and it does the tamping for you. Those are very expensive solutions to what's a fairly simple problem, which is, you know, you can, and you know, obviously people have, you can ensure in a lot of different ways that the piston stays parallel to the basket walls as you tamp, or rather it's the bottom of the piston surface stays parallel to the upper surface of the basket, basically ensuring that you are tamping level every time. So there's a couple of different products that do the same thing. There are some that look more like traditional handle tampers. There are some that look like these puck tampers, but a lot of them basically solve the problem the same way, which is they create a rim that is whose surface, the horizontal surface, is parallel to the piston's horizontal surface, and then the piston has an adjustable depth somehow. So there's like the push tamper is an example of that. The push tamper has actually a similar design to this, except they use I believe they use a grub screw to like screw in and hold on. So it actually cuts down on the mass. These Mahlgut tampers can be a little bit on the heavy side because they have extra mass with the adjustment, but you know, they're certainly not like cumbersome to use or hold. So puck tamper is kind of similar. There's one called, I think, the 5-star that actually takes a slightly different approach, where it has the piston. It's a more traditional tamper, and then there's like a plate, like a restriction plate, that levels the piston as it's pushed down. So again, you know, like there's different approaches to this, but the end goal is the same, which is creating a level tamp every time you do it without really having to worry too much about the human error that can involve. And like I alluded to earlier, it's not impossible to tamp incorrectly with one of these. If I were to set the depth like, you know, really, really deep here, set it pretty much, basically extend the piston as far as it can, and then try and tamp, obviously that means that my restricting collar here doesn't hit the basket, which means that I can introduce a lot of wobble as I tamp. So there is, you know, there's still potential for a little bit of human error, but within most reasonable use, you know, you're protecting yourself a lot more than a traditional tamper, and you're going to introduce a lot more consistency as long as you're using the product correctly. And again, you know, that is a huge benefit to a commercial setting, where, you know, a lot of us are using grinders that have automatic timers that will dose pretty much the same amount of coffee every single time that you hit the button. We're starting to see more and more grinders that take more account for their actual particle consistency. You know, basically trying to create a very consistent product, shot to shot. We have grinders like the Mythos one that take account for the temperature of the grinder and how that affects how coffee is, or well, like the actual like geometry of coffee grounds that are created as the grinder warms and cools. So the Mythos says, well, let's try and keep it at a consistent temperature. So, you know, we're kind of in a point where we're recognizing that there are a lot of consistency problems in coffee, and some of them can be addressed with very simple solutions. So like these puck tampers are very just kind of quick and almost elegant way of solving that problem of, you know, sometimes my baristas tamp way askew or don't notice, and they're not tamping level every time, and their shots are channeling, and you know, basically any given customer is served a different coffee product than the one before them. So by eliminating those problems, by using like a puck tamper or something like that, you're creating a more consistent product for your customers. So, I mean, really it's something a home user can certainly appreciate, but really it's the commercial side where people get more excited about this stuff. But anyway, Mahlgut specifically, we've really liked their products. They're well engineered, and again, what we really like is the fact that they have solved the problem by saying, okay, let's make a sort of compact device that has basically infinite adjustment. So like I said, if you're switching coffees or something, maybe you're a multi-roaster shop and you have one espresso on yesterday or whatever, and you're switching to a new one today, brand new espresso, brand new dose, brand new depth in your basket, you could basically try and say, okay, well, here's how my tamper is set, and I don't want to get a new plate, or I don't have another plate to set my depth differently. Let's dose according to that tamper. Yeah, okay, you can do that. That's probably not the best way to dial in a coffee. So with the Mahlgut's design, you can say, okay, well, I need 1 millimeter less, or not 1 millimeter, like 0.7 millimeters less of depth on here to get my ideal compression on my puck. You can do that, and it's really easy to do. As I said, you just basically play with the adjustment mechanisms, twist your piston a little bit, bring it in as much or as little, or extend it as much or as little as you need. Really easy to do on the fly, but also because you can twist and lock in those settings, it's not going to slip around on you, and you don't really have to worry about people kind of messing with it unless they're intentionally doing so. So the Mahlgut, or like the ecosystem that Mahlgut's created around their tools, we've really been impressed with, and we see a lot of potential for it in those commercial settings where people are looking for really easy to use tools. They don't want anything extra. I mean, I work in a coffee shop on the side, and I can't think of how many little things and pieces and bottles that we've lost because they just aren't in the place that they're supposed to be, or it's hard to keep track of stuff when you have 12 drinks lined up in your queue, and if that little wrench that you need to adjust it gets knocked into the grinds bin or something like that, there it goes, and maybe it wasn't noticed. So the solution here, I think, is a little bit more elegant because you don't have to worry about anything extra. But that's just my opinion, and there are certainly some drawbacks to the Mahlgut as well, especially as I mentioned, the mass. They are certainly heavier and a little bit more large than some of the alternatives on the market. So that might not be appealing to everybody. Anyway, so one of the things that I also want to talk about with the Dozer specifically is the ability to use it as what I would call a pseudo tamper. So I did say that the Dozer is not really supposed to be used as a tamper. It's not really supposed to compress your coffee. But if you want to play around with it, you certainly can. So by changing the depth of the Dozer and kind of playing with it, and of course this is basically where I would say probably not in a commercial setting, but if you are a home user and you've got a 58 millimeter basket and you want to play around with a no tamp style shot, you can use the Dozer to basically grind in stages. So grind, groom, just grind a little bit at a time, set the depth accordingly, and groom it each time. And because you're compressing a little bit every time that you groom it, you've basically compressed in layers. And almost, in some ways, like I did this with a Maser Rober, and I actually got better results than dosing normally, grooming it, and tamping it afterwards. I got better results by dosing a little bit in stages and grooming each time, which was really interesting to me, and maybe says something about the clumpiness that grinder had when I did it. But I don't know. It's just a very interesting experiment if you've got the time to do it. So if I go ahead and do this, my 19 gram dose, I don't know, maybe I'll try and do, and it does take a little tiny bit of playing around to figure this out. See, I actually have too little coffee in here. The Dozer is a 58 millimeter base, and it's tapered slightly, but the basket inner wall is also tapered, so I need to dose a little bit more than I did just now in order to make sure that I'm not scraping the bottom of the basket. But again, it's very, very easy. Like I've kind of got it down rote at this point where I can just, loosen these up and give them a quick little twist to adjust the depth of it. All right, let's see where we're at now. That's 15. So I will take this in a little bit. And then I have one more. That should be about. So I'm just a little over right now, but I'm going to 19.1's fine by me. And then my final stage, nice and level. I feel it. Oh, there's a little bit of adhering there. I can feel it kind of grabbing just a little bit, which is what I want, but I wanted a little bit more of that, so I actually just set it like a hair deeper. And there we go. So I'm not going to tamp this. I'm just going to go ahead and pull a shot and see what happens. And I'm going to pull it the same way that I pulled it with the previous shot, which is basically let it go pre-infusion until the bottom becomes fully saturated, and then throw it over into the full brew mode. And right now the flow rate seems maybe a tiny bit faster than the shot before, but really not much different. And in fact, it's centered more quickly than the one before it. But that's just that's 2 shots. That's not enough data to say. But yeah, it's pulling just a little tiny bit faster than the one before it. But again, it's kind of interesting and a little fun to play with it as a pseudo tamper. Like, it's not something people generally try. I've heard of people doing experiments where they grind and tamp in stages or in thirds. To see, especially with lever machines and home grinders, to try and get a better extraction because you get a more even bed that way. But it's, I don't know, with the Dozer it just maybe it's not all that different, but it seems a little bit different because you're not really tamping, you're just sort of distributing. And like I said, there's a little tiny bit of compression, but also a lot of lateral movement. So you're basically just sort of spreading the grounds around evenly and then creating thin sort of layers of slightly compressed coffee. Taste-wise, I haven't done a lot of experimentation with it, but in terms of flow rate, it seems to be almost on par with grinding and tamping as normal. So very, very interesting. Anyway, so that's pretty much the rundown of the Mahlgut products that we have. We currently carry the Dozer and the Buzzer. The Dozer, as I said, only comes in a 58mm size. The Buzzer comes in 58 and 58.6. The 58.6 is meant only for ridgeless VST baskets. I don't know, it might fit IMS baskets or other sort of oversized or precision baskets. But we basically got them because, according to our testing, that's kind of like the tightest fit you can get consistently in a ridgeless basket. Unfortunately, it won't really fit the ridged baskets. I think 58.4 is the better size for those. They are slightly different. I think 58.5 sometimes fits a ridged basket, but more often than not, 58.4 is kind of where you want to go. But also worth mentioning is we're giving away a Dozer on Instagram right now. So if you go ahead and follow Prima Coffee on Instagram, all you have to do is post a picture with the tag Prima 15K giveaway, and you can find it on our account. But we're doing a drawing tomorrow. Sadly, it's only available to U.S. Competitors or entrants. But on Friday, we're going to pick a winner, and we're going to ship you one of these. A black Dozer anodized aluminum. Great little tool, fun to play with. Or working with your bar flow and see how your shots can get more consistent. So with that in mind, if anybody has any more questions, now's the time to get them in. Otherwise, feel free to follow up with us on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or wherever. Give us a shout. We're always happy to answer your questions for you. Anybody? Cool. And we'll See you later.